The THEOS Cybernova podcast, hosted by Paul Jackson.
Welcome to episode 4 of season 2 of the THEOS Cybernova podcast. Today's guest needs no introduction. Famous not only in the cybersecurity community in his home country of the Philippines, but also right across the Asia-Pacific region where he has worked extensively. I'm delighted to welcome Jay Gomez, Associate Director in Cyber Advisory at BRG Consulting, to the show. So thanks for joining us today, Jay.
Thank you so much, Paul, for inviting me over. Really excited about this.
It's a real honor to have you on the show. You know, I've known you well for a number of years now, and I'm really excited to hear from you today and share your stories and your experience with our audience. So on that note, perhaps you can kick us off by telling us about your career story, how you made it from pretty humble beginnings, really, to being a recognized leader across the region as you are now. What's your story?
All right. I'll probably start with, I was a working student before. I didn't go straight to college, basically. So I took a 2-year electronics course. And then after the first trimester, I was able to land a job in a semiconductor company. And then I worked all throughout after that. And then after graduating with that course, I was able to work in Manila Electric Company, which is a power distribution company in the Philippines. And then after that, I was a desktop support before, endpoint support.
Wow, you really did start in humble beginnings then, didn't you? This is really right at the beginning. And you went to the University of Life, I guess you'd call it.
Yes, that's correct, Paul. So after that stint with Meralco, I worked at the Asian Institute of Management for 6 years. Pretty much started as a desktop support again, and then I did some programming. I did network administration and system administration back in the day when we have Windows servers. And then I had a stint in Singapore for 3 years. Started off as a Lotus Notes administrator and a Windows administrator. But the fun part with being in Singapore is that I have another role in that company. I used to support games. I used to support CrowdStrike and Warcraft. So I was a system administrator on the side and also a gaming support person. So I was required to play in my job.
Wow.
Yes.
I think you've got a lot of very jealous listeners on this one. They would love to be gaming whilst on the job.
Correct. And that's in 2003, we went back to the Philippines and I became an IT manager in the contact center industry. So that was a booming industry back then. And I stayed in that industry for about 9 or 11 years, starting as an IT manager and then becoming a regional IT director before. So I was an infra guy through and through. So managing IT operations, networks, help desk support, development, Windows administration, server administration. And I was building sites actually across the Philippines in my stints in Alorica and also Cognizant Technology Solutions. Then after which, back in 2012, so I did 4 years in Cognizant. Then I went to ABS-CBN, that's the biggest broadcast station in the Philippines, which is also a conglomerate. So I became the head of information security and the concurrent data protection officer. So I stayed there for 4 years and then moved to Hong Kong and moved literally on the other side from being an in-house cybersecurity and data protection executive, if I can say that. And then now I'm on the consulting side.
Who persuaded you to do that then, Jay?
The greatest cybersecurity professional I know, it's Mr. Paul Jackson.
No, it was a good decision because I think your ability to share, your extensive experience. I mean, all the stuff you've done has led to, to you developing such a depth of knowledge and information. And I think consulting right now is the right place for you because it's so much in demand, all the skills that you have. And we'll cover that during this podcast. But what made you sort of transition from the IT side into cybersecurity, though? I mean, was it just a natural thing or was it just something you had a passion for?
That's a great question, Paul. Back in the day, in my stint with Alorica, so we are a U.S. contact center and business process outsourcing company. So therefore, we were supporting clients that handle credit cards, handle healthcare information. So therefore, we were being audited with PCI, Sarbanes-Oxley, for example, HIPAA back in the day, and also ISO 27001. So since I was doing and managing IT infrastructure and operations, I was being audited by people from our US internal audit group, and then also from external auditors. Then our chief information security officer, then whose name is also Paul Lagacy, he said, "Jay, are you interested in cybersecurity? Because this is a very new and really good field." So I guess, and I said, yes, why not? So he mentored me and he said, you know what, take a course in cybersecurity and then get yourself certified. So I did. I reviewed for ISACA's CISM, which is Certified Information Security Manager. I did a review class and then took the exam in 2010 and I passed it. And I retained the membership ever since.
Yeah, we'll come to that in a little bit later because your role in community engagement, predominantly via ISACA, is huge, and you become a bit of a legend in that regard. But let's talk a little bit more about the cybersecurity angle first, because with your experience, you've got nearly 30 years in, despite you look like you're still in your 20s, which is very annoying for someone like myself. But you've been in IT, cybersecurity, and data privacy. What real shifts have you seen in the field over those years, and have you adapted your approach during that time?
Certainly, Paul, because back in the day, it was there wasn't any cloud. I mean, cloud is not even a concept back in the day. It's a client server, pretty much on-prem infrastructure. Basically, you still have the brick and mortar offices. So we set up firewalls, switches, and those relevant connections. MPLS, IPLCs are there. But now you have cloud, you have Wi-Fi, you have AI basically in the IT mix. So it really, there's a really huge difference between the IT back then versus what IT looks like right now. Even the workforce themselves, before we all used to work in the offices, but now you would have a hybrid setup. Some would work from home 5 days a week. Some doesn't even go to the office, but some do, come to the office once in a while. But it's very different from what we're doing back then.
Yeah, sure. It's I mean, there's nothing as sure as change in this industry, isn't there? And that's one of the challenges, isn't it? Keeping on top of the changes in technology. And right now, with the shift in AI, I mean, it's really becoming almost out of control in many ways. Trying to keep up and follow the risks and the threats of the emerging technologies. But AI is a topic I'd like to come to later in this podcast, because it's definitely a hot topic right now, and it's something that I'd like to chat with you further. But let's talk first about your data privacy role, because it's quite unusual, to see a CISO and a DPO in the same seat. And what motivated you to, I guess, did you volunteer or were you volunteered? I don't know, but into the DPO role when you were at ABS CBN, because as I understand it, right, and correct me if I'm wrong, the law in the Philippines is one of the toughest for a DPO, because if I'm not mistaken, there is a threat of imprisonment if you fail to do your job properly. I mean, how scary is that? You could be locked up for failing to protect data. Is that true? I mean, and why the hell did you volunteer for that job?
Maybe, so back in the day when I was still with ABS-CBN, so I was doing information security. And then when the implementing rules and regulation of the Data Privacy Act of 2012 came about in 2016, or mid-2016, so the deputy commissioner back then was a good friend of mine, Don Di Mapa, and he messaged me and said, "Hey, Jay, there's already a DPA, so I guess you guys need to comply." And I said, "What DPA?" So just research it and then get back to me. So I did. And then I learned about the law. It was, promulgated in 2012, alongside with Singapore back then. But the IRR only came about in 2016. So I said, okay, this is something new. And coming from the contact center and BPO industry, we're very familiar with frameworks and regulations. So I said to my CTO back then, okay, I'll volunteer because this is a new field, this is a green field, and I think I can contribute with the regulator, which is the National Privacy Commission. So I think I was one of the first DPOs back then. I think I was DPO number 6 or number 8. So we went through the process, did some trainings, and then I was able to implement the program for my company back then, and then also helping out shaping the policies and the regulations because we are all new. And then I think it went pretty well because now we're considered as the go-to guys in terms of data privacy and the leading experts, not just in the Philippines, but also in APAC because we were the first ones who adopted such regulations. So I think that's
Absolutely.
the story. So I volunteered, Paul.
You volunteer. That's good. I'm sure you did. You seem to volunteer for everything in my experience. You're one of those kind of people. But, in one of the big bugbears, you're now settled in Hong Kong, working there and with your family, etc. in Hong Kong. And there's a massive contrast, isn't there, between the law in the Philippines protecting data and the law in Hong Kong? And I'm sure you've looked extensively at this. Do you get frustrated that it's not tougher, perhaps, in terms of data protection in Hong Kong?
Not really, because there's still the law, there's still the PDPO or CAP 486, the ordinance itself. But I think the government of Hong Kong is trying to improve it. I think they're now have introduced, apart from PDPO and revisions of the PDPO in the pipeline, but now they have their critical infrastructure law, which is getting everyone excited because that would add another kind of focus, if I can use that word, in protecting not just infrastructure, but also the data subjects that are using those infrastructure. So I guess there's a positive there.
Yeah, so I guess your role at BRG, and in fact we should actually give a shout out to BRG Consulting, and appreciate you joining us from there. But I guess this is in part of your role, isn't it? Because companies are grappling with these new laws, such as you mentioned the cybersecurity bill in Hong Kong. And I guess it's a key role for you to be advising companies and organizations how to navigate this. And in many ways to, I don't know if this is a real word or not, but operationalize the requirements of data privacy and of things like the cybersecurity bill. And I'm guessing that's a key role for you at BRG Consulting.
Yes, definitely, and not just in Hong Kong, but I also cover the wider APAC region. It depends on the jurisdiction. For example, in Singapore, definitely cybersecurity and data privacy are really top concerns.
Yes.
But in Hong Kong, obviously, maybe data privacy would probably be in a lower, not priority, but cybersecurity is top. It is the topmost focus. So it depends on the jurisdiction. Indonesia, because they're the new guys in the neighborhood in terms of data privacy, so they're catching up, and so does Malaysia be updating theirs. And now comes Thailand and Vietnam. So there's really a huge opportunity out there in terms of data privacy, but cybersecurity must not be forgotten because still it's a number one focus, basically.
So data privacy is an interesting one, isn't it? Because you could argue that it's a legal topic rather than a technical topic. But in reality, I guess there's two components to it, isn't there? You should be working side by side, and I'm not a data privacy expert, but I guess you should be working side by side with the in-house legal team or external legal advisors.
That's correct, Paul. You're correct in saying that. Back in the day when I was a data protection officer, the company attached a lawyer to me.
Okay.
Well, there were questions before whether should we appoint a lawyer as a DPO and maybe consider Jay as the support for that data protection officer. But my argument was very simple. What I said was the law doesn't change that much. All right, there may be revisions to the law, or there might be implementing rules or regulation adjustments, basically, or new memorandums or new circulars. But it's not as it's stable.
Right.
It doesn't really change much. But cybersecurity and threats, they always change. 2 years ago, we don't have AI. We don't have ChatGPT. Now we have ChatGPT. But what other additional or updates in the law were made? Virtually none. Right. So I guess cyber and the threat landscape is more dynamic than any changes in the law. So I guess that's the reason why I was kind of perfect for the job back then. But they did give me support.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective, because I see this a lot, where a DPO is actually a lawyer rather than a technologist. And you're probably right that the dynamic nature of technology and, operationalizing it, which is the hard part, is really falling into the technical field rather than the legal field. So, yeah, I guess there's no right or wrong here, but it certainly makes sense that somebody like yourself would be a perfect fit for a DPO role. But again, companies, I guess, they may not have or feel that they need a full-time DPO. Now, I know in the Philippines it's obligatory, right? It's a must. Am I correct in the law? You have to have
That's
it.
correct, Paul. So the law requires for any personal information controller and also processors to appoint a data protection officer. However, the law and the implementing rules and regulation also says that the DPO can also assume other roles unless there's a conflict of interest. If there's none, then that should be fine.
Right.
That's why I was head of information security, but I was also concurrent data protection officer because I don't have any IT operational duties or responsibilities. I don't manage the firewalls. We review the firewalls, but we cannot change any rules. We cannot update any rules. We audit Windows user access logs, but we can't create user access or usernames.
Right.
So that's the difference.
I see. Okay. So, I mean, you've got a fantastic memory for all these laws and regulations. I'm really impressed. But, it really is quite, fascinating to me how the job nature has evolved. And looking at other organizations around the region, many don't appoint a DPO. And that, I guess, is where, your kind of services come in, because they can outsource it, can't they? They can have an external advisor as a DPO or not as the aside DPO, but to advise on data privacy subjects. Is that correct?
That's correct, Paul. Some jurisdictions, it's very explicit in their laws that they should appoint a data protection officer. For example, Singapore. To some extent, Malaysia, yes, they said you're required. I think Thailand, yes. Philippines, definitely. But there's also a provision in the law that says you can outsource the functions of the DPO. So that's a service that we can provide. So I may not be the appointed DPO of the company or the controller, but I can do the functions of the DPO, meaning I can monitor the DPO mailbox, I can do the data subject access request, I can respond to subject inquiries, I can do the privacy impact assessments and so on.
Yeah, got it. Before I switch gears slightly, I mean, has anybody actually been arrested in the Philippines for failing to do their duty as a DPO?
I believe the National Privacy Commission has cited a couple of companies in violation of the provisions of the law, but no one has been jailed yet. Maybe they were meted out fines.
Yeah, it seems a bit severe, doesn't it? Locking somebody up for. But anyway, so, but many organizations still don't really get the need for this. I feel it's my sense. I mean, how do you, what do you recommend for getting organizational buy-in for a data protection management program, especially in environments where awareness is low, and there are many places like that in the Asia Pacific region?
I guess the main driver for appointing a DPO is if the law requires it. If the law doesn't, then there's no incentive for the companies within that jurisdiction to appoint a DPO. However, they are still bound to at least observe and provide due diligence and due care on how they would protect the personal data that they collect. However, those jurisdictions that do require to appoint a DPO because of the law, then they have no choice or option. They need to appoint one.
Right. And I guess it's not only about the law, it's about the stick, isn't it? You
Yes.
look at Singapore, they're pretty robust in enforcing their laws. Philippines, maybe less so. Do you think there's a level of maturity there that the authorities in the Philippines still need to reach in order to be effective in investigating and enforcing the quite tough laws that they have?
To be honest with you, the Philippine Data Privacy Act is comparable to Singapore. I think based on what I saw across APAC, our law is actually maybe second in terms of how good and stringent it is. The only issue is that, and the main difference with Singapore is that they do enforce. In the Philippines, we do enforce, but maybe not as ideal. But if they do a very good job in enforcing it, then maybe a lot of companies would toe the line.
Yeah, but this is a tough one, isn't it, for the authorities? And I get it because it's difficult. If somebody is good at this kind of stuff, is good at cyber investigations, security, etc., then they tend to get grabbed by larger companies and taken out of private sector roles. public sector roles into the private sector. Is that your sense in the Philippines?
That's true to some extent, Paul. But I think one of the challenges of the Philippine government, especially the National Privacy Commission, the regulator themselves, is really about budget. I mean, resources, because running data privacy regulation is not an easy task. There's a lot of companies in the Philippines. There's a lot of data subjects that you need to manage because we're like 110 million people.
Yeah, a lot.
So there's quite a bit. I guess it's a matter of resources. Given ample support from the national government budget, they would be able to hire more people with the right skills and be able to manage that properly.
Very good point. Well, let's not pick on the Philippines too much, but I'll ask you one last question about the Philippines. Let's sort of switch gears towards cybersecurity rather than just data privacy. What do you feel about what's your perspectives on the current standards of cybersecurity across the board in the Philippines versus the rest of Asia? Because now you've had experience working right across the region. What's your gut feeling about the sort of levels here in the Philippines?
Comparing the companies in the Philippines with the ones I've seen in APAC, I think the Philippines is kind of improving in a way that a lot of companies are now moving towards improving their cybersecurity posture by trying to raise security awareness, trying to get the right governance in place in terms of policies, applying right risk management frameworks, also implementing at least solutions that would minimize whatever risk that they may be exposed to, given the resources that they have. Because at the end of the day, companies in the Philippines may not have as much money as the other companies, let's say, compared to Singapore or Hong Kong. But I think they're going in the right direction. Now, the only issue is that there's a lot of small and medium businesses in the Philippines, and those companies comprises at least probably 90% of the companies in the Philippines. The big conglomerates are just maybe less than 5%, if you're going to ask me. And those have money, right? The major banks, the large conglomerates out there. But the small, medium enterprises, they're the ones that are really exposed. And they don't have the resources, they don't have the capabilities to protect themselves, even putting in a semblance of security within their own organizations. So I think that's where the challenge is. And that's pretty much similar to what I've seen in Indonesia, what I've seen in Malaysia, and some other smaller companies in Hong Kong as well. Because at the end of the day, the priority is keeping the lights on, meaning IT operations,
right?
The basics that they need to run their business. But security normally would take a back seat, which is kind of unfortunate. But it's kind of similar, just on different scales, maybe.
Yeah, it's interesting. And do you think there's enough Chief Information Security Officers, CISOs, in the Philippines to fill the needs of all the organizations here?
Unfortunately, there's a huge gap in terms of qualified Chief Information Security Officers, or at the minimum, maybe just information security managers or directors or leaders, basically. There's a huge gap in that one because, again, it boils down to, resources, because admitted or not, a lot of companies that have job openings for CISOs, especially in Singapore and in Hong Kong, where the salaries are way higher than what's being offered in the Philippines. So some of the really good ones that I know already left or are planning to leave, not just in Singapore or in Hong Kong, but also in the Middle East, like Dubai and those other Arab countries, and not including Australia and New Zealand, which are also opening doors for IT security professionals.
I agree. It's quite sad to see, because I've seen that as well. There's definitely a brain drain, unfortunately, from the Philippines of some top security talent. Yeah, which is, I don't know, either of us have a ready answer to that, but it's unfortunately an economic reality of the industry here. So I guess that means that companies in the Philippines perhaps should be looking towards vCISO type services or external advisory services, because I think, to be honest, with that gap in skills here, the companies like yourselves and others provide that kind of service where they may not need a full-time, really experienced person who's going to cost an awful lot of money. but rather just have a part-time advisor to come in and make sure that they have a robust and mature approach to cybersecurity.
I agree with that, Paul, certainly, but it really depends on what company demographics, basically, who would need such services. So, for example, for small and medium enterprises, then 100% they should consider a virtual CISO or a fractional CISO that probably can help them lay the foundations, because I mean, resource-wise, they might not be able to hire one and maintain one. But for those larger companies, depends on what their business is, whether it's a business that handles a lot of consumers, or maybe businesses who are into critical infrastructure, or services like hospitals, tollways, telecommunications. I do believe that they should have at least an in-house cybersecurity expert, because in any organization, you need to understand what the company is doing, basically what's the business all about, and the context within the company. You should understand the dynamics even, right? So I think an in-house CISO would be more ideal for those kind of companies. But for the smaller ones, yes, vCISO would be highly recommended.
Yeah, I kind of think about this in a lot of different ways, and I fully agree with you, of course. But also, I think even the bigger companies, right, when they have a CISO, how do their leadership, how does the CEO and the board know that CISO is doing a good job to protect them when they don't have that experience themselves to oversee? So a CEO and board, etc., will probably have the expertise and experience to oversee all the business functions, but it's very rare that they would have experience to oversee cybersecurity. So they have to trust their CISO that he or she is doing a good job, right? So maybe there is room, therefore, for a vCISO type service to validate and to enhance, or to, because one person can't know everything as a CISO. And I always think that it gives comfort and validation to a board or a C-suite if an external advisor comes in and just takes a look at the programs, etc., internally.
That's a very good point, Paul, and I totally agree on that. What the companies can do, and probably some of the companies are already doing it. I mean, in some organizations, they would have an internal audit group which actually audits the work of IT, the work of information security, or the CISO themselves, or the CISO themselves. And obviously, if it's a mature and experienced CISO, that person should have already KPIs and metrics that they keep, and that is reported to the senior management in a regular basis. Now, CISOs, it's our responsibility to update and apprise the board on what's going on within the organization, and that is where the skill of the CISO being able to communicate such programs that he has implemented within the company, if it's moving the needle or not, or if the solutions or the different implementations that he or she has done within the organization is bearing fruit, or meaning there's a return of investment, that the CISO should be able to communicate that to the board on a regular basis. Because I think trust for the board, the senior management, to implicitly trust the CISO is not a good thing, because you need someone to kind of, to your point, need to validate what he or she's been doing. And a second pair of eyes would be very helpful, and an objective one for that matter, like an external, CISO like me, being able to assess the achievements or the programs of the current CISO, the in-house CISO.
Right. Yeah. I think we're on the same page with that one. Let's switch gears a little bit to talk about your community involvement as we close out the show, because you are something of a legend in ISACA, right? You obviously been a member now for a number of years, but you've not only been a member, you volunteered to be on the board here in the Philippines, and you're a regular speaker at events, etc. How important do you view community involvement and in particular your role with ISACA?
So being a member of ISACA is very rewarding for me, in a sense that when I joined back in 2010, so I maintained the membership ever since. So I was volunteering in a number of committees before. And then fast forward 2016, I was nominated to be elected as part of the board of trustee, which I was able to win. And then I think I was board of trustee from 2016, skip a year, and then from 2018 onwards, I have been a board of trustee ever since. And then a member of the different committees like professional development, membership, conference, for example. And the good thing with being a member of ISACA Philippines is that we are able to reach out to our members and even the wider group who are interested in governance, risk, and compliance. And the other thing is that I was able also to mentor some members if they're planning to take the certification and so on. The other thing also is that I'm also teaching some modules of the CISM course, and I'm also accredited to teach the CDPSE certification as well. But probably the best thing, or maybe the one that I wanted to probably share with the listeners, is that being an ISACA board of trustee and a volunteer, we're not being paid. It's all under our own time. So this is on a purely voluntary basis. So what we get out of volunteering is just the CPE hours just to maintain the certification, but we're virtually getting nothing but really good experience and good colleagues and networks within the professional organization. And I've been doing that since 2010.
Wow, you're such an inspiration to the the more junior listeners that we have on a regular basis to this podcast. And I know you love mentoring and I know you love teaching, but let me change. I was going to ask you, how you encourage more talent to enter the cybersecurity field, because we need more talent. But instead of that, I'll ask you, if you could give one piece of advice to your young self when you were starting off in your career in network support, what would it be?
Wow, that's a tough question. I guess I would probably have done more programming because back in the day, I love programming, but hardware is my first love. Networking, infrastructure, networking, endpoint. But I probably would have focused more and learned more programming languages. I did assembly before and C++,
You're showing
maybe
your
a little
age.
bit of Visual Basic, but that's about it. After that, I really focused on infrastructure, networks, operations, and then became a leader or a manager after. But I probably would have focused on development, software development.
Got it. So you actually touched on a very important point in your answer, because a lot of people enter this field, right, and they're at a technical level, which is great, of course, but you've made that leap. You've bridged that gap between being a technical person and being a leader. How do you advise those who aspire to be a leader like yourself, to be a Jay Gomez one day? How do you what do you need to make that gap, to bridge that gap?
Maybe what I can say is that I didn't started as a leader myself, but I was a very good follower. If my manager in Asian Institute of Management before said, Jay, jump, I would ask how high. If he says run, how far? And I don't really complain. I just take all the orders and just do it. If I found something kind of amiss, I'll finish the job first and then complain later. But I think that's how I started. But I think probably the value that probably one must have in order to become a leader, or a good leader or a great leader, for that example, is actually you should be a trusted person. Because if you can't be trusted, then you cannot be a good leader, because it's all about trust, especially in our line of job. If your people and if your stakeholders cannot trust you, then you don't have any place in cybersecurity or data privacy. Because once that's blemish, then it's not worth it anymore. So trust is number one, absolute.
That's a fantastic answer. And yeah, it's something we live by, of course, in this field: trust, building trust, relationships, and credibility in our work. I'm going to ask you one last technical question before I move on to the usual music question. But AI, I had to come to it, right? AI. Now, we talked about entry level positions and people entering the field in cybersecurity. Is there a concern that AI may be taking away some of these jobs and hence reducing the number of people who can enter at the bottom and work their way up. Because, we're talking about AI now being the next analysts in SOCs, which is a key entry point typically for cybersecurity. Do you see AI as, whilst it enhances cybersecurity, do you also see it limiting opportunities for juniors to enter the field?
I don't believe so.
Hmm.
I mean, at the end of the day, humans are behind the keyboard. And in every AI conference or webinars that I've attended, they would always mention there's always a human in the middle or in the line. So there should be someone who's really kind of validating, verifying, and making sure that AI is doing what it's supposed to do. It's there as a tool, but the humans should still be, the one who's going to be in charge. It's good to have. I mean, if we have AI before, when we were back in the day, it would have made my work much easier rather than doing those kind of repetitive tasks. But again, it might. I'm not saying that it's gonna take away jobs, but I'm looking at it that it would enhance actually, the work of the security analysts. But again, us as security professionals, we should always kind of evolve, upgrade ourselves. If AI is here, then why not study it? Why not use it to your own advantage? Because it's a tool. But at the end of the day, you need to, get your basics right. You need to learn how to network, how websites work, how endpoints work, how patching works, and all this stuff. But AI is just a tool. If you can use it to your advantage, then it's good for you. So that's what I can say about AI.
That's another great answer. And thank you so much for sharing your insights. Now, to our listeners, if you've enjoyed the show today and all our other shows, please hit that like or subscribe button on whatever platform you're listening to this episode today. It really helps us to grow the show and reach a wider audience. So in closing, Jay, thank you again for being part of this today. But I always ask our guests what they're listening to currently music-wise, because it's my way of unwinding, right? So I always like to hear from our guests what they're listening to, and please don't tell me it's Freddie Aguilar, right? What do you listen to, Jay?
Thanks for that, Paul. Actually, I have a very wide repertoire of music that I love. I mean, as long as it's good to listen to, I don't really mind who sang it, which band, which era. But actually, I'm listening to a lot of John Mayer songs.
Okay. And is it true?
So I really like him.
Is it true that, like all Filipinos, you have an amazing singing voice and you rock the karaoke?
I can sing, but I'm not a natural singer. I'm a developed singer, but I can sing. But John Mayer is the one I really like, and I always listen to when I'm traveling, especially on the plane.
All right, that's fantastic. Look, Jay, thank you so much for joining us today and being part of the show. I hope to get you on again because we sort of skimmed through a few topics that we could really dig into, and I'd love to go into more depth with you on those one day in the future. But thank you very much for joining us today.
You're welcome, Paul, and thank you for inviting me over.
THEOS Cybernova was presented by myself, Paul Jackson. The studio engineer and editor was Roy DeMonte. The executive producer was myself and Ian Carlos. And this podcast is a co-production between THEOS Cyber and W4 Podcast Studio in Dubai.